The scorching air shimmers above the deck, the planks are bleached white, the crew lies exhausted, with swollen tongues and cracked lips, surrounded by an endless ocean of useless salt water. These are the infamous horse latitudes, the equatorial doldrums. It was here that Spanish ships once threw horses overboard to save precious fresh water for the men. The captain, ignoring the despair, gives a strange order to the cook. Bring the cauldron, the lid, and a clean cloth. The crew looks at him like he's a madman. But this wasn't magic. It was a forgotten law of physics that could save them all. But at what cost? Trying to quench your thirst with seawater is like fighting a fire with gasoline. Every sip doesn't save you, it hastens your demise. Here's why. Seawater contains about 35 grams of salt per liter. Your blood has only 9. Human kidneys can only produce urine with a salt concentration of no more than 22 grams per liter. To expel the excess salt, your body will use more water than you drank. This isn't just dehydration, it's cellular suicide, ordered by the ocean. So, we have a crew on the brink of death, and an order that sounds like a madman's ravings. In the next few minutes, we will not only build this ingenious survival machine from scraps, but also find out why it was almost never used. More importantly, we'll uncover the real, far more boring, but effective secret of pirate hydration. And this secret will shatter everything you thought you knew about them from the movies. We're going to do what all romantics fear. We'll raise the Jolly Roger and see what's really hiding behind it. Spoiler alert, it's not a treasure chest, but an accounting ledger and a logbook for water barrels. The cook hauls a heavy copper cauldron onto the deck. He fills it with seawater and places it over a fire. On top of the cauldron, he lays a piece of clean wool. In the center, he places a stone to make the fabric sag. Then he covers the whole setup with an inverted lid. This contraption is no pirate innovation. It's a forgotten technology. The principle itself was described by Aristotle in his Meteorology around 350 BC, ancient science resurrected by sheer desperation. The principle is ridiculously simple. When water boils, only the water turns into steam, the H2O molecules. The heavy salt molecules are left behind in the cauldron. It's like letting go of a balloon while the weight stays in your hand. And here's the crucial fact. The boiling point of water is 212 degrees, 100 degrees. The boiling point of salt, sodium chloride, is 2,575 degrees, so 1,413 degrees. To salt, boiling water is just a warm bath. It is physically incapable of evaporating along with the water. The steam rises and touches the cold inner surface of the lid. To speed up the process, sailors pour cold seawater over the outside of the lid. The lid acts like a cold window in a steamy bathroom, forcing the invisible vapor to become visible and liquid again. Due to its conical shape, drops of pure fresh water run down to the center, and from there, they drip directly onto the sagging cloth. The cook removes the wet wool and wrings it out over a clay mug. One of the sailors takes it with trembling hands and takes a sip. There isn't a trace of salt, only a faint taste of smoke and metal. It's the taste of absolute purity, the taste of a miracle. It sounds brilliant, a simple and elegant solution. On a scale from Hollywood fiction to daily routine, this method is in a very strange place, because this ingenious idea had 3 fatal flaws, 3 drawbacks that turned it into a deadly trap. This device wasn't a life raft, it was a deal with the devil. It gave you a sip of water today, but demanded the very soul of the ship as collateral, and time the crew no longer had. First, fuel. To keep a cauldron boiling for hours, you need a constant, strong fire. And the only source of wood on a wooden ship is the ship itself. The math here is ruthless. To produce just 1 gallon of fresh water, you need to burn about 10 pounds of dry wood. This means you are literally dismantling your own home to survive another day in its ruins. You chop down the mast, break up the deck planks, and burn the longboat. Every sip of water costs you a piece of your only chance of salvation. Second, speed. Even with an endless supply of fuel, this primitive distiller produces water agonizingly slowly, perhaps a quart every 2 hours at best. Now, back to the math. A crew of 80 men in the tropics needs a minimum of 40 gallons a day just to stay alive. If your device produces 1 quart every 2 hours, it would need to run for 320 hours a day to hydrate everyone, which is physically impossible. Trying to provide for a crew this way is like fighting a forest fire with an eyedropper. And third, the ocean itself. Some might ask, what about a solar still? A piece of dark cloth under a plastic sheet where water evaporates from the sun's heat. On paper, it works. But a ship is not a static object, it is constantly rocking. The constant pitching and rolling prevent the condensation from collecting. The droplets are simply washed back into the salt water before they can drip into the collector. A solar still on a ship is like trying to build a house of cards on the back of a running horse. Now, put yourself in the captain's shoes. You have this slow, ship-devouring method, and you have a crew that will be dead in 2 days. The captain's choice wasn't between a good solution and a bad one. It was a choice between a slow, certain death for everyone and a ghost of a chance at life, a chance that might have to be paid for with blood, his own or someone else's. But the real answer to this deadly riddle wasn't in blood, it was in the sky. The main source of fresh water on the open sea has always been rain. During a tropical downpour, a ship ceased to be a fortress and became a giant funnel, greedily catching heaven's mercy. Pirates would stretch extra sails and tarps between the masts, turning the deck into a water collection system. But they didn't rush. The first few minutes of rain were useless. They used this water to wash the accumulated sea salt from the sails. Only after ensuring the water was running clear did they direct it into the barrels. And this brings us to the greatest pirate treasure. It wasn't the glint of gold. It was the muffled gurgle of water in a barrel. The primary target when attacking a merchant ship wasn't a chest of silver. It was provisions, food, rum, and above all, fresh water. A ship with full barrels was more valuable than a ship with money. In the famous articles of Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts, the rules for dividing provisions and water were on par with those for weapons and loot. They called it liquid treasure or wooden gold. But even captured water was dangerous. And here we encounter a shocking fact. Pirates often preferred beer, ale, or grog to water. The reason wasn't drunkenness, it was safety. Water in wooden barrels under the tropical sun would turn into a murky, foul-smelling soup of bacteria and algae within weeks. The low alcohol content in beer or rum acted as an antiseptic, killing the germs. A barrel of water was a lottery with dysentery. A barrel of beer was a guarantee of survival. The choice was obvious. It wasn't debauchery, it was basic epidemiology. There was a whole system in place. Fresh water was poured into new, clean barrels and stored in the deepest corner of the hold as an emergency reserve. For daily drinking, they used water from older barrels, which often had to be filtered through cloth. The key figure on the ship wasn't the gunner, but the cooper, the man who maintained the barrels. The life of every man depended on his skill. Sometimes, a silver coin was tossed into a barrel. Silver has weak antibacterial properties. It was more folklore than science, but in a desperate situation, anything was worth a try. We think of pirates as fighters, but let's look at them as logisticians. Their main task wasn't to board a ship. It was to calculate how many barrels of water and beer they would need to get from Jamaica to the Carolinas without dying of dysentery. For a crew of 100 on a 6-week voyage, about 4,200 gallons of liquid were required. That's nearly 16 tons. Their entire life of freedom was dictated by this tedious calculation. A pirate captain was less Jack Sparrow and more a logistics manager in a very hazardous industry. And this logic applied not just to barrels, but to the very essence of piracy. 9 out of 10 pirate attacks ended without a single shot fired. The purpose of the Jolly Roger wasn't to start a fight, but to prevent one. It was a psychological tool to compel merchant ships to surrender. A battle meant risk of damaging your own ship, losing men, and worst of all, puncturing the water barrels. The Jolly Roger wasn't a battle flag. It was the logo of a very effective brand specializing in hostile takeovers. Their business model was built on intimidation, not destruction, because damaged assets were worth less. 90% of the time, pirates were not warriors, but laborers. Up at 5 a.m. for endless cleaning, swabbing the deck, tarring the hull, and mending sails and rigging. A wooden ship in salt water is an organism in a constant state of decay, demanding constant care. Their main enemy wasn't the Spanish Navy, it was the shipworm, Teredo nivalis. Not a worm, but a mollusk that bored tunnels into the wood, turning a solid hull into a sponge in a matter of months. The fight against it was perpetual. This is where the phrase, "to pay the devil," comes from. The devil was the longest and most difficult seam on the hull, and paying it meant sealing it with tar while hanging over the water, one of the dirtiest and hardest jobs on the ship. Their food was as grim as their work. Not roasted pigs, but rock-hard biscuits infested with weevils. Pirates grimly joked it was extra meat, and salt beef, as hard as wood, that had to be soaked for hours just to be chewable. But worse than hunger was scurvy, a disease that killed more sailors than cutlasses ever did. Scurvy is when your body forgets how to repair itself. Collagen, the glue that holds you together, stops being produced. Old scars reopen, and your gums literally rot. It was a slow disintegration at the molecular level. And all this for what? Fabulous riches were for the few, captains like Blackbeard. The average pirate got his share, only to drink and squander it in port within days. Then it was back to sea, to the boredom, hard labor, and rotten food. The share system was fair. A captain received 2 shares, specialists like the carpenter 1.5, and a sailor 1. But most of the time, there was little to divide. Piracy wasn't a career. It was the gig economy of its time, with an astronomical mortality rate. The big score was like winning the lottery. Everyone dreamed of it, but only a handful ever got it. So the real pirate survival protocol, stripped of all romance, looks like this. First, pray for rain and turn your ship into a water collector. Second, attack merchant ships not for gold but for barrels of water and beer. Third, drink grog, not water from an old barrel, to avoid dying of dysentery. And fourth, distillation. Leave that trick for those with a death wish. That cauldron and lid device is a me plan, designed for one person's survival. It's selfish. It burns the shared home to save a single life. The captain's plan is a we plan. It's boring, it's about logistics and accounting, but it works for everyone. The story of pirates is not one of daring adventures, but of a desperate struggle for basic resources. Their genius was not in the flash of a cutlass, but in their ability to survive where the environment itself, the ocean, tried to kill them every minute. And this ingenuity wasn't just technical, it was social. With their elected captains, fair division of spoils, and system of compensation for injuries, pirate ships were radically democratic oases in a brutal hierarchical world. This, too, was a survival mechanism that made the crew stronger and more united. So who were the pirates of the Golden Age in the end? Ingenious survivors who cheated death itself, or just 18th century truck drivers forced to steal their own fuel, risking execution after every run? Post a single word in the comments, geniuses or truckers. Let's see which one gets more votes.